Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of HBHA Lore. I'm thrilled today to be joined by a wonderful guest who many of our listeners will know well. Many of them will have had as a teacher. He just finished up his 20th year teaching at Hyman Brand last year. So right now he is diving into year 21. Welcome to HBHA Lore, Rabbi Berel Sosover.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here
It is
and a pleasure
absolutely
to
right.
be talking to you.
Oh, I can't wait. As I was telling you before we started recording, I've known you for a long time. In fact, going back as far as myself being a student of yours and being lucky to be a colleague of yours for the past 13 years. And still, there's some questions of things that I would like to know about myself. So I'm sure that our listeners would love to hear more about you as well. So my first question that I'd like to start us off with is obviously you've been at HBHA for a long time, but I'd like to rewind the clock back a bit before then. Could you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and kind of the path you took to becoming a rabbi?
So I grew up in Crown Heights, which is in Brooklyn, New York. Spent all my time there in school, yeshiva. Was from those who actually, a lot of students would go out of town to other places. I ended up staying there, went through the system there. Um, at what point did I know I wanted to become a rabbi? I'm not sure, but probably at a youngish age, I would say. And once graduating high school, once finishing up yeshiva, I spent 2 years in Brazil,
Oh,
helping out in yeshiva there in São Paulo. Picked up a little bit of Portuguese, and then did my rabbinic ordination in 770, which is the Lubavitch World Headquarters, and got my smicha and became a rabbi there.
wow. Wait, I do want to hear a little bit more about this Brazil thing, which you kind of snuck in there, and I had no idea you were there. And please answer this question in English, or if you want to dust off a little Portuguese, you can. But how did you end up in Brazil for 2 years? And tell us a little bit about the work you were doing there.
So, in general, once we're done with yeshiva, there is a program where they send the boys out at 20 years old, 20, 21, something like that. And they would send them out to different yeshivas throughout the world to help out with the yeshiva, to help with the younger students there, programming and all different types of activities within the yeshiva and sometimes also within the community. Some of them were more local, some of them are in the United States, some of them more abroad, Australia, South Africa. So we were a group of six. We ended up a core group that ended up in Brazil together, a few of my friends, and we were there for 2 years. We helped out with the students there with their whatever it is that they were doing, ran programs to get the kids more excited about the things that we wanted them to be involved with Jewishly, as well as did a few community events, not a lot within the community, but we did a few community events. For example, we did a Lag BaOmer parade that we had a whole bunch of, we got the younger school involved, not just the yeshiva that we were in, but with the younger schools, the community. So we did other things outside of the yeshiva. And we also actually in Brazil summer, which is winter over here. So in January time, we went to Rio de Janeiro, spent a few weeks over there, helping out a few of the Chabad shluchim in that area. So we did quite a bit while we were there in Brazil. But that was a 2 year program.
That sounds like a really incredible experience, and I had no idea about that. As you mentioned at the beginning, you said that from a fairly young age, you knew you wanted to be a rabbi. Now, being a rabbi can go in a lot of different directions, right? Some people end up with a pulpit. Your experience has mostly been in the field of education. Do you always know that you wanted to go into more of a teaching route with being a rabbi, or did you ever kind of envision doing other things in your role as a rabbi? How did you end up becoming the illustrious teacher that you are?
So that was something which I didn't know until later. What exactly I wanted to do, what field I was going to be in, I did not know until I was already maybe getting married around that time, learning in Colo for the year, taking classes on education, and then seeing what opportunities came up, and everything just fit into place and worked out that way. But I did do some teaching, talking about teaching, as in camps, have classes, taught younger kids in camp, as well as other programs where I did some teaching. But formal teaching, didn't know that I would go into this until probably after I got married.
Okay, so as you mentioned, you grew up in New York, spent some time in Brazil. Those are big cities. So how, with all that, did you end up winding your way to our much smaller but still very mighty Overland Park community? How did you end up from there to finding your way teaching here at HBHA?
So, as I mentioned before, I was in Colo. Generally speaking, as Chabad, we always are exploring and looking for ways to further Jewish education throughout the world, and looking for opportunities as part of the Rebbe's army to enhance Jewish education in cities where Jewish education is not as vibrant as in Brooklyn, New York, and Crown Heights. So always looking for opportunities. And while I was there, this came up. Somebody approached me through actually Rabbi Friedman's son, who was also in Kollel at the time. And there was a guy here named Avi Markowitz who reached out to the Friedmans, asked them if they could find somebody to bring to help teach at the school. They're looking for Jewish studies teachers. I believe at that time, a lot of the Jewish studies teachers were community rabbis, which wasn't working out very well. Because they always had their other commitments that came before HBHA, and they had a lot of days that they couldn't show up or something like that. And he wanted to find more solid, committed teachers at the school. So he reached out to them. His son reached out to me. We started a conversation, and the rest is history.
The rest is history indeed, and we have all benefited from it. Were there any surprises in store for you just about the difference in shifting from life in New York City, life in New York to life here in Overland Park?
So as I told people then, it's been a while since I had people ask me this question, but just after we moved here, people would ask that question all the time. How's the culture shock? The difference in pace. And I think it's a lot harder coming from a place like this to a place like New York, where everything is fast paced, driving changes, everything is completely different around in New York, where you have to really, get tense sometimes. Where here things are much more relaxed, and it's a nicer type of a change. Where now some people do like the busy life and they don't like the quiet life. Now we don't live out in Idaho where where nothing's going on, but we are here. It is a city. Overland Park is a city. It's not a dead place, but it's not like New York, so it's more relaxing. If you ever get stuck in traffic around here, you're probably not going to be more than 5 minutes late, or something like that. Where in New York, you don't know what's going to happen. It could be a 2-hour delay or something like or the like. So yes, it's a majorly difference, but I think in a very nice way.
Well, before we get into HBHA memories and questions about Jewish teaching, which I have a lot of them for you, which I'm excited about, I did want to first branch out to talk about some of your other many talents, because in addition to your rabbinic talents and prowess, you have a lot of other skills. One of them is woodworking, something that you have also brought to us through various things you've built for the school and various winterums you've run over the years. So could you tell us a little bit about your experience with woodworking, how you got into that, and maybe some favorite projects that you might have done for yourself over the years, either something you've done either just for your own family or something that you've done as part of the school?
So how did I get into it? Well, I think my older brother, I don't know, he did different things, and I helped him while he was doing those things. For example, he had a lot. We have by us a lot of books. We own a lot of books. We keep a lot of books, and when we needed room to put them,
the book.
Yes, exactly right. So when we needed to have more space for our books, we built bookshelves and things like that. Just little things here and there, and just got to understand how it works with cutting wood, doing things. And then afterwards, just always, whenever something had to get done, whenever I had to do something, just try it, see it, try it out, and do it. So it wasn't anything professional that I ever experienced and that I took professional classes for, but it's just something that, a little handy, and just did the little odds and ends and things that had to get done.
Any favorite projects you've made over the years?
So major projects that I've done over the years, I don't know major, but the winterums that we've done, we built the bima that we still use in Conference Room C in the Mechitza Minyan, that the little tabletop bima that was built with a winterim class. We built an ark which is now replaced already, but we built an ark Stenders throughout the school. We actually made little arcs, miniature arcs for the younger grades downstairs for their toy Torahs that they use during their davenings. So we built those as well during winterims. For myself, majorly, I don't know about anything major, but I needed our table was a little smaller than I liked it. So I found a way to extend it, bought these extenders, put out the wood, made it, that the table could open up way much bigger to what it was able to open before. Just trying to think what other things, I don't know, but I don't know, but necessarily wood, but putting down tile in a bathroom needed that done. So
sometimes you just need to get things done around the house.
Exactly. So it's easier to do it yourself than to call somebody else to do it for you.
Well, speaking of being very dexterous with your hands, another talent that I know you have, which requires quite a bit of dexterity that I know I would love to hear more about, and I'm sure listeners would love to as well, is that you are also a Torah scribe or a sofer. And I know that that's a very involved process. Could you just tell us both a bit about how you became involved with that, how you became a sofer, and also just tell us a bit about the details that are involved with writing a sofer and with writing a Torah and any specific experience that you've had in doing it.
So I got involved, don't remember, it's probably about 13, 14 years ago is when I started. I never thought I would do something like this. It's a very different type of skill than using your hands, building something. It's a very, very detailed type of skill. And my handwriting was I never had a great handwriting. I wouldn't call myself an artist in any way. So this was never something that was up my alley that I ever thought I would do. I have a cousin the guy's married to my cousin who lives in Israel, a scribe. And he was in New York the same time that I was. It was summertime. It was during one of our summer breaks where we go to New York every summer. And he asked me something, talking about being a teacher. He says, you have all this summertime free, Sundays free. Why don't you learn to become a scribe? I said, nah, it's not for me. It's not something I wouldn't be good at it. He says, try it out. You never know. So I looked to see if there are any classes that they're being offered during the time. As actually, usually we went to New York for shorter. That year was an extended trip for some reason. I think it had to do with Shavuot finishing school before Shavuot and wanting to be there for that point. So I had quite a few weeks, and I said, let me see if there's anything. And I looked around, and I found somebody who says 5 weeks or something, 4 weeks, whatever it was, we could teach you how to become a scribe. Oh, wow. I said, I'll take some classes. Now, yes, in 4 weeks, maybe you got the basics, but it takes afterwards a lot of practice and years of practice and experience to get there. So there's two parts to becoming a scribe. There's the details of the writing, which is one part, and getting all the letters straight and making sure that the letters look the way they should look. But then there are laws as well, which are thousands of laws that one needs to learn in order to become a scribe, right? So you can master the talent, but then you also have to master the laws, which there's a test for that, in order to get certified. And in general, somebody who writes and doesn't know the laws is probably making mistakes. So there are
you said there's thousands. Obviously, that's too many to share. But what is an example of maybe one or two types of laws that someone would need to know as they're going about it?
So, for example, when it comes to, let's say, tefillin or a mezuzah, where it all has to be written in the correct order, right? So, for example, if, let's say, a letter was written out of order, it's not kosher. Well, you might think to yourself, okay, big deal. Who's writing anything out of order, right? Well, sometimes you make mistakes, and then you need to go back and correct the mistake. So the question is,
writing a full book, you're pretty likely to accidentally skip a word or misspell something, and that sounds pretty
yes. So with the Torah, luckily, it doesn't have to be in the correct order. Okay. So if mistakes happen, those are easier to correct. But with tefillin and mezuzahs, those do need to be in the correct order. So if somebody makes a mistake, even if the letter is not shaped properly and the letter is not the way it should be, depending on what it is exactly, sometimes it could be corrected, sometimes it can't be corrected. Before writing God's name, one has to sanctify the name of God and say, I am writing this name, this word, the sanctity of Hashem's name, and specify which name, whatever it is that when you're writing. There are many
every time you write the name?
Every time you write God's name.
Oh, because that's a pretty popular name in the Torah.
Yes. And so a lot of thought. You can't be, listening to classes even or other things. You really need to concentrate on what you're doing so you don't make any of those mistakes. Or even something where, let's say the letter doesn't come out properly, right? So you want to say, you know what, I'll just scratch off a little bit of the letter and then the letter will look better. Well, the letter would then is written through scratching, through engraving rather than through writing, which is an issue which cannot be done. It has to be written. It cannot be engraved. As the Torah says, right? You shall write them. It has to be done in a way of writing, not in a way of engraving. And so these are just a few of the laws, but every letter has laws to them, as well as the general, as well as in general, there's so many other laws that come along with it.
So if you make a mistake, is there any way of fixing it? Or is it simply, if you make a mistake, you got to start the whole project over from scratch? But
It depends. It depends. It really depends what the mistake is and what, for example, let's say in a mezuzah, let's say I wrote a word and I realized I made a mistake. I could erase that word and rewrite it properly. Now it takes also work, to erase it properly, scratch it out, make the parchment what's it called, the right texture once again, to be able to rewrite on top of it. But once you write God's name, you can, and remember, tefillin and mezuzot have to be in the correct order. You can't erase God's name to go back and fix the mistake. So once that happens, you're done. Start over, new piece of parchment once again. And mistakes happen all the time. We're humans. And that's why every time I write something, always get it checked, computer checked, just in case you missed a word, in case a letter was missed or whatever might have happened. And then also another person to check it over manually to make sure that it's always good everything should get double checked before anything gets sold.
So how many Torah scrolls have you written?
So I never wrote a complete Torah scroll.
Okay.
Because that's something, as working as a teacher full time, I wouldn't have the time to write a Torah scroll. Somebody who works on this full time, it would take them somewhere, averages is about 10 months to write a Torah scroll.
Oh, wow. That's a full-time gig.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And therefore, and I don't know that they're writing 8 hours a day. It could be they're doing all the little things on the side while they're doing that. But it takes 10 months to a year to write a full Torah, which I don't have the time for that. I would love to one day, but as of right now, never did. However,
in your very relaxing retirement, you can
maybe
dust off a Torah.
Maybe. But one of the things that is done with Torahs in general, Torahs go to many different communities throughout the world. And people like to have the Torah completed in their community, right? So the Torah gets written by a scribe, wherever the scribe lives, and then it gets shipped to the community, and they write the final letters there in the community, and people come up and they get a chance to fill in a letter, and this way the community has a participation in the writing of the Torah. So that is something, usually the sofer that writes the Torah does the outline, and then the local sofer is just going to help people fill in the outline to finish the last few lines of the Torah. So I've done a number of those here locally as well as in other places. I did the KU Torah, the one at Chabad of KU, did their Torah, completed theirs a number of years ago. Did the one at Chabad House in Leawood. Did the one at Torah Learning Center. So those were the local ones, but I've also done a few in other places as well, as Arizona, Wyoming, Omaha.
You've got Torahs all over this country.
So they need a scribe to fill in those last letters, so I did that a number of times.
That's fantastic. All right, so we've talked about woodworking. We've talked about your experience as a sofer. Any other hidden talents? Those are the ones that I knew of that are kind of your best known things. Anything that you can think of where you're like, I'm also a great juggler, or something else that maybe people don't know about, but a hidden skill of yours?
I don't know. Things still have to come out,
That's right. Okay. So I do want to pivot now a little bit to the namesake of this podcast, which is HBHA Lore, where we dive into not just the incredible things that you've done throughout your whole life, but specifically some of the memories and experiences you've done here. So you've been here, as we said, for 20 years. So just thinking about that, let's start kind of big picture. What would you say you're proudest of what you've been able to accomplish or what you've seen from the school and its growth and its evolution over your past 2 decades of being here, and specifically connected to your role in the school.
So to me, obviously, what's the most important is going to be Jewish education, right? That's why I'm here. And that's why the school is here, right? The school is here to help children, give children a Jewish education that shall last a lifetime. So for me, the biggest accomplishment is when I see students who I taught going out, living Jewishly, connected to their Judaism in one way or another. Those are the things that really say, you know what, this was worthwhile doing, spending all these years here, right? Each individual student, and watching them grow in their own path and watching their connection that they have with Judaism is something that makes my role of what I really want that the students should be doing, and what makes me feel good about what I'm doing here. You know, sometimes you do something, you don't always get to see what you accomplish. Sometimes it takes many years. Sometimes you don't get to see it. But thankfully, there are plenty of cases where I do see it and I do hear feedback. And those are things that really keep me going for what I'm doing here.
Are there any particular, it could be a class, it could be just a specific moment that jumps out at you, or something that just you think about that you're like, that really exemplifies what I was talking about there, something that I did or something that we did as a community or that we did as a school, whatever it might be, or even something that might have just happened one-on-one with a student that made you be like, yeah, this is really fulfilling that purpose and that mission that I'm striving for.
Yeah, so definitely when you see sometimes the individual students, those are thankfully, thank God, a lot of those where you see that where how the student was where they are today, and they give the credit, you know, that they would tell me that it's because of you, or whatever it is. I'm sure some, you know, definitely take some of it. Yeah, don't know that necessarily all the credit, but definitely
you had your role in your journey.
Yes. But then sometimes you have a class, you know, where, let's take, for example, I did last year a medical ethics class for the freshmen and the sophomores. And it was a quite large class. Some students who never enjoyed Jewish studies before. And, you know, and after the end of the semester, and they're like, wow, this was a great class. And they learned so much, and they really connected in some way or another with it. And to me, that says a lot, where, you know, where a student who not necessarily connected so much with their Judaism before, or didn't find necessarily the relevance of Torah in their daily life, sees, hey, 1 second, there is relevance of the Torah, how it tells us how to guide our life in important issues, not just, you know, how to do a mitzvah, how to put on tefillin, but actually it guides us in how we deal with situations where sometimes uncomfortable situations, some medical situations, and all different types of situations that are not necessarily Torah specific, but in general, it guides us through our life. And when students see those things and they realize that the Torah is really more than just an ancient book, but something that's alive, those are things that for me is really the most important.
Well, that's actually, you know, you read my mind. I was actually going to ask you a question specifically about, I knew you taught that medical ethics class. I know you also teach, I don't know if you're teaching it this year, but I know you've taught an elective that has to do with money usage in Judaism. And so I was curious about exactly what you just talked about. If you have some examples that you could give, it could be things that you teach students or just things that you go over in your class that connect to what you were just saying, how we can think of the Torah and other ancient Jewish texts not as living in the past, but how they can inform people's lives, even in not what they might think of as a directly Jewish sense. Like you're thinking, you know, medical decisions, how I give to charity or how I utilize my money. You know, those aren't necessarily things that people immediately think of as, oh, I need to look at what the Torah says about that. But how do you try to use Jewish texts to help students think about their daily lives, even in a non-traditionally Jewish sense, if that makes sense?
Right. So those are two great examples. The money class, which is a 7th and 8th grade class that I do every other year. It's considered an elective. So we have every year a core class that we teach, which all of the seventh and eighth grade is learning the same thing. And then the second semester, they have a choice of what they want to do. And last year, one of the choices was money. It's the second time I did it. And yes, it does teach the students that there's a Torah way how to deal with money, what we do, how we do business. It's not just, so there's about tzedakah, obviously, right? How much money should one give for tzedakah, etc. How much tzedakah to give, how to give tzedakah. But it's more than that. It's also about business, how we deal with business with other people, how we, what are things that are considered cheating? What are things that are okay? How do we, all different types, even, some things that the Torah talks about, weights. Right. Sometimes, your weights have to be exact. And so you think to yourself, okay, we don't have weights today that work the same way. What does that mean for me? And then, you talk about the scales that you use at the grocery store or the gas station pumps that are being monitored. They're supposed to be that you're paying for what you're getting and making sure that you don't cheat the customers and all these little things that money that comes into our daily life that has to do with money is something which the students are learning and seeing that, something, yes, there's the Torah guides us how we do business, how we go about our life. And then, yes, how we treat other people, right? In the medical ethics class, part of the beginning is more about how we treat other people. What happens if you see somebody, unconscious? What is your reaction supposed to be? It's easy to ignore and say, what, let somebody else take care of it. And surprisingly, unfortunately, there are in this country many times where people get hurt and people look and see people on the floor hurt and just walk by and figure, whatever, it's not my business. I'll let somebody else deal with it. And showing them how it's important for the students that when they see something, you got to do something about it. Whatever the situation is, talking about and going through end of life issues. But then there's also other classes that would be this is a core class, which would be life cycles. Again, life cycles, yes, on one hand, a lot of those things are Jewishly related, but it's something that everybody does. Bar and bat mitzvah, weddings. What's the Jewish way to do these things? What's the proper way? When a person passes on, what's the right rituals of how it's done, sitting Shiva, etc. Right? Going through all the life cycle events, which happen whether we like it or don't, they're going to be part of our life. And understanding what are those things? How do we conduct ourselves when it comes to those things?
I think that's really cool. I think it's great how, like you said, sure, there are going to be a lot of students who really like the text study and like just, reading the Torah, reading the Tanakh, studying the verses and talking about that. But there's going to be other students who that might not be the thing they most directly connect with, and they might even think, oh, I don't know what relevance it's going to have to my life. And through these classes about money, life cycles, medical ethics, those are things, like you said, they're unavoidable, right? They're a part of your life. And if you choose to, and if you're open to it, you can learn and understand how the Torah and other Jewish texts can guide our thinking about it. So I think that is probably a great avenue for a lot of our students to connect to Judaism in ways that they might not have even thought as being really options or connected to their Judaism in any way, which is, I think, really fantastic that they get that opportunity, not just in like casual conversations, but really in classes where they get to dive into it.
Yes. And yes, like you mentioned as well, which I didn't really emphasize, but there is also text study. Obviously, that's everything is with the text and everything is. And then we also have electives of Talmud class. If a student really wants to learn Talmud, we have options for them as well with the Talmud. So there's so many different options over here for the students, whichever avenue they decide to choose. There's always things that the students can benefit from.
Absolutely. Shifting gears slightly, another thing that I know is not just something that I know, but that you are well known for in the school is you are a legendary davener, a legendary prayer, right? You are the head of the Mechitza Minyan, and you read Torah there, and you've just been the person in charge of the Mechitza Minyan for many, many years. But I also know that prayers is sometimes the thing that, a lot of students and a lot of people, even if they care about their Judaism, find difficulty connecting with or doing on a daily basis. What advice would you give to someone, or what would you say to someone who says to you, I care about Judaism, it matters to me a lot, but I just find it very difficult to have prayers be a meaningful experience for me? What would you maybe tell someone like that to help prayers become not just something they do, but something that really is a meaningful part of their daily routine.
Right. So if somebody is looking for it to be meaningful, it's easier. To get somebody to want to make it meaningful, that's a little bit more difficult. But if somebody's really interested, part of it is always, to focus on certain sections of prayer, right? We don't have to focus on to focus for the whole time that we're praying, whether it's 30 minutes, whatever amount of time that we have for prayers is very difficult, right? We could barely focus for 10 seconds straight, let alone for 30 minutes on prayers. So every day to try to focus on another part of davening, right? To take something else and say, today this is my focus. Open up the English Siddur and say, today I'm going to look at this. Tomorrow you look at something else. And every day make it something different that you're focusing on, that every day it's new and every day it's something unique, right? Yes, if it's the same thing every single day, it's hard to make it interesting every single day when you're doing the same exact routine. But if you change it up, and change it up doesn't mean that, do some kind of interesting, something alternatively to prayers, but rather within prayers, change it up and say, today, this is my focus. Today, I'm going to look at the English paragraph on this section, on the Ashrei. What is the commentaries? There's commentaries on the bottom of a lot of the Siddurim, and to read through some of those commentaries. Obviously, if you're going to read through all of them, it'll take you forever to finish davening every day, right? So you can't go through everything every single day, but every day to take another focus, take something else. And if you do happen to finish one prayer book, there are other ones out there that have different commentaries inside. So it's endless. And once somebody gets into it and they understand the meaning behind it and they understand what's behind the prayers, hopefully that in itself would make it more interesting and exciting for them to continue praying on a more into the prayers. Then for somebody else, it might be the ruach, right? Singing, so we do some singing in our davening as well. Sing Ashrei, sing something else, do some davening in a way of spirit where it gives them a little energy and gives them a little bit of a push to continue davening.
I love the way you phrased that, how, everyone has difficulty focusing for an extended period of time, especially if you're doing the same thing every day. But if you can just hone in on some small snippet of some chunk where you're like, I really want to devote myself to this prayer, to this verse, to this idea today, and focus my full intention on it, that can be really meaningful. And then it can just grow and expand from there. And if you really take the time to delve into one prayer and understand it well, sure, you're focusing on it that day. But then another day, if you're focusing on something else, you still have those memories and those ideas, and now that better knowledge of really what you're saying and how to grapple with it. I think that's really well said. Okay, this next question for you might be a little bit tricky, okay? You are obviously a man with a vast Jewish knowledge who has taught pretty much every Jewish topic under the sun, Torah, Tanakh, Mishnah, Talmud, you name it, you've taught it. And I realize this might be like choosing among your children, which I, of course, would not make you do. But even if you love it all, is there a particular snippet or story or verse, just some particular teaching that anytime you get the chance to, or maybe you get to teach it rarely, or it just comes up occasionally, but is there one that you kind of always gravitate towards and you're like, just on a personal level, I love teaching this Jewish text or this specific Jewish story or this specific Jewish idea just because of everything that I think that someone can gain from it or why it's thought-provoking? And just, I know that there's thousands of things you could choose from, but are there one or two things where you're like, just on a personal level, I love teaching these and the interactions I have with students or even adults or anyone when I get a chance to teach and talk about this Jewish teaching?
So talking about, there's a difference between teaching and what I enjoy learning myself. It sounds like your question is more about what I enjoy teaching.
You can answer it either way or both. I'd be curious either. I mean, you're drawing from such a vast knowledge base. I'm curious from all those thousands and thousands of texts, what you would be like, you know what, these are two that really resonate with me or that I really enjoy the conversations I have for whatever reason it might be. So feel free to answer it either way, that you enjoy teaching or that you enjoy learning about.
So first of all, I wouldn't say a specific piece of something, but I would say a certain style, right? So Talmud, even though Talmud is probably from the smallest classes I'm teaching with the fewest students, but that is something which is the most thought-provoking, you get the most pleasure out of it when learning the Talmud. That would be one thing teaching wise. So again, not a specific piece of Talmud, but Talmud in general, I would say is something which is a subject that I would enjoy teaching a lot. The other thing which for personally, which I would like to learn, and if I can teach it too, that is also great, is the Rebbe's talks. If you ever learn through the Rebbe's talks, whether it's on the Parsha or anything else, how he takes an idea and how it gets explains an idea so well, where asks a question, looks at a Rashi in depth, could ask like 10 questions on one Rashi and say, look at this, that, and you're like, once, how are all those questions going to get answered? And then with one idea and one thought, and all of a sudden, boom, everything, all the questions just like fly away. And then at the end, taking those things and bringing it down into practical lessons that we can learn. And that's something which I am very into, especially with the students, is always taking and saying, something, what lesson can I learn? What practical thing can I take away from this thing that we learned? Actually, I'll just mention this here as well. Some people out there might know, but not too many people yet on my weekly text. But I send out a weekly text message for students in a way of keeping in touch with students. So sometimes I get responses, usually send it out and not necessarily, but it's a way for me every once in a while, say hello to somebody after I send my text message. And I try to keep them extremely, extremely short, something on the Parsha usually. And it's going to be, if let's say, if you have WhatsApp, sometimes you have to press read more to see the rest of the message. I try to keep it within that range that you don't have to click on that read more, otherwise people might not read it. But what the idea is, it's called the challenge of the week.
Oh.
And it's always something where it's to do something that week. What is something that you can do to become better? Do something this week, do something in general, take something onto yourself, something new that you didn't do before, or do it a little bit better. So every week there's a little challenge, and that's something which I really think is the most important, is taking away a practical lesson, even if it's something abstract. What lesson can I learn from this? What is it that I can take away that to change myself, to make myself a better person?
I like that. Can you give us an example of a challenge of the week?
Maybe so, for example, this week's challenge. Let's
do it.
I'll pull it up over here.
Now, I will say that when this airs, this will have been the week's challenge from probably several weeks prior, because we're recording this in advance of when it airs. But it's okay; people can still do the challenge, even if the Parsha has come and gone by then.
Yes. For sure. Just give me a sorry.
No, you're fine. It's more than worth the wait. I can vamp while we're waiting for the challenge to be brought up. People are ready.
There we go. So last week's challenge. In this week's Parsha, a person is compared to a tree, right? Last week was Parsha Shoftim, and it mentions Ki Adam Eis HaSadeh.
Parsha.
There you go. Okay, one lesson we can learn is that when a tree is young, even a small bend will affect how it grows. So too with people. The education and values will give children when they are young, what will shape them as adults. Every small word, encouragement, every good example, every lesson leaves a lasting mark. Jewish education begins from infancy, when a child is just a seed, and continues until they grow into mature adults. Challenge this week: focus on the young trees around you. Whether it's your child, younger sibling, student, or other children you interact with, share a positive word. Teach them something from the Torah. Show them a mitzvah in action. Even the smallest effort can help them grow straight and strong. So this was this past week. So this is something, just a little something. Do something. This past week was about education. Every week it's on another topic.
I think that's beautiful. Although I do have one caveat, I would say. I don't know if that would all fit before the read more part of the WhatsApp. It seemed like it might have been a little too long to fit into without clicking read more, but it's a beautiful message, and one that certainly people can apply whenever this airs. Even though Shoftim will have come and gone by then, that they can apply it for that week. Absolutely. I'm curious if there is, you were talking there about your experience and your love of teaching Talmud and learning Talmud. Is there any sort of just maybe a lesser known small verse that maybe people aren't that familiar with, but you're like, hey, everything that you've been talking about today, the theme I've noticed is about not just learning, but putting things into action. Is there some teaching you could briefly share with us? I realize I'm putting you on the spot to think of something off the top of your head, but just it could be a verse from the Talmud, it could be a verse from the Torah, or any text you want, but that maybe reinforces that idea of not just learning something, but putting things into action.
Right. So the word Torah itself.
Oh, here we go. He was ready. No hesitation.
The word Torah means teachings. That's what it's all about, right? Torah, Mora is a teacher. So Torah is teachings. That's really what the Torah is there to do. It's not a history book. It's not a book of necessarily of laws, because it's a combination of all of them. But the purpose of it all is Torah. Purpose of Torah, teachings. Teachings means that it's something for us to learn. It's a lesson from the word hora'ah, which comes from the same root as well, which means a lesson that we can learn from. So just without needing to go into any specific verses, just the general concept of the word Torah teaches us that idea.
Wow. The title alone was giving us the lesson that we needed all along. Okay, we are almost ready to wrap things up here, but I have to ask a question that is very important. On the very first episode of HBHA Lore, the guest was Sam Matzel, and he shared a story about being in your class and about thinking that he and his classmates could pull a fast one over on you and could be on their computer during class time doing whatever they wanted to do, playing a game. And he said that you caught him, and he told the story from his perspective. Now we have Rabbi Sosover himself on here. Is there anything that you want to add about your perspective on that story, so that we can hear things from the teacher's perspective and not the student, Sam Matzel's perspective?
Yeah, so first of all, yes, when students are on their computer doing other things, most of the time I think teachers can tell.
And Rabbi Sosover, for people who don't know, is about as technically savvy as they come. So if you think you're pulling a fast one on him, if you're a student listening to this, trust me, you are not. He's on to you.
So the question is, I knew they were doing it, but the question is, how do you actually catch them in a way that they can't say I wasn't, right? Yeah. Students are extremely fast. You can walk over to the computer, the tabs are changed. It doesn't take much. It's just a slide of the finger. And I was not doing anything wrong.
Oh, what? What are you talking about? I was fully invested in this teaching.
So what I enjoyed about that specific story was that the student who it happened with was a tech-savvy student.
Mm-hmm.
And he was sitting in the back of the room against the wall.
Sure. And
what I did was, and for this, not a secret, but anymore at least, I took, what are they called? The iPad Nano.
Okay.
They're really, really thin iPads, that music players, but they also have a capability of taking videos. So I put it actually like behind a poster.
Sure.
That had a little hole in it.
Incredible.
And moved the poster to a position where tested it out and saw where am I going to get the best view of what I'm looking to get. Yeah. With the camera right at the hole so they can play the video afterwards. So I did that, and the student went crazy all year. How did you do it?
How did you know?
How did you get a video? He's like looking behind him. There's nothing there. And I didn't tell him until the end. I don't know if I told him at the end of the year or after a few years later.
Maybe it was a graduation gift.
But he went crazy about trying to figure out how I was able to get a camera behind him to be able to take that video. So actually, I once told the story to another class, and I had a student every time he would walk into class, he would walk over to the posters, feel around
the posters, make sure that
make sure there's no cameras, and then he would sit down. Okay,
now I can play my computer games in peace because no one. I feel safe that the poster was secure. That's funny. Any other humorous anecdotes you want to share from 20 years of teaching? I'm sure that you've gathered many of them, or it could be a funny one, or it could be a memorable one. But just any before we go, specific memories with the class that might jump out at you? They do tend to blend together.
Something to come to mind right now, I'm not thinking of anything, but definitely have many memories from all the years that I taught, starting from I've taught as young as third graders.
Uh-huh.
And all the way through 12th graders. So definitely had a nice spectrum of ages of students. Been in middle school and high school for quite some time now. And I don't know, just seeing those students coming back and seeing their each time getting to see them once again, those are memories that I enjoy. So any specific right now, you caught me off guard, but
There's too many. They blend together over the years. 20 years. Yeah, it's a lot of classes, a lot of students going through there, and it all blends together into one big mishmash sometimes. But we'll always have you catching them on the camera, which is just absolutely fantastic. Well, Rabbi Sosover, this has been absolutely delightful. It's been wonderful on my end, getting to hear about your journey to becoming a Jewish educator. How lucky we've been to have you at the school for the past 20 years, hearing your various teaching philosophies and some of the classes that you've done. Really, to me, what jumps out, and you can tell me if you agree or if you'd add something else, but the main thing I hear when you're talking about what your goal is of what you want students to get out of things is, yes, obviously to learn Jewish texts, to learn Jewish laws, but really to think about how they can take what they've learned and put it into practical action in their own lives and use it as a guide for how they live. And, one of the things here is we're blessed to be at a Jewish day school with a wide variety of Jewish practice, right? We have people who are conservative, Reform, Orthodox, Chabad. They have different ways they connect with their Judaism. But it sounds like no matter where that student falls on that spectrum, you want them to be able to take what they've learned in your class and apply it in a meaningful way to their life. Would you agree with that? If anything else you'd want to add about what you really hope students get?
yes, that's exactly what it is. To do something else, take on another mitzvah, to do something, just another something, um, and make them feel more connected with their Judaism, but not just feel that way, but to bring it into practice. Whether it's the way they run their regular daily lives, whether it's mitzvahs that they take on, whether it's their general perspective of life changes, but something, yes, to be able to walk away and say, something, I'm a better person, I'm a better Jew through this what's experience that HBHA experience.
Well, I think that's about as good a place as we could possibly end on. This has been a wonderful conversation. I have learned a lot from it, and I know that our guests, that our listeners will love to hear from you and see you. Both students who may have had you in the past, students who are having you currently, parents, other faculty members listening. I know they'll learn something fascinating from you from this conversation, just as they do every time that you teach. So thank you so much for joining us on HBHA Lore, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you around in the hallways.
Bye-bye.
Bye.